Welcome to Wake Up with Dr. Cheryl. Hello. Our show is about transformation in wealth on all levels, whether it is relationships, money, assets, nature, spirituality, and especially love. There is wealth in all of these areas. It's time to wake up and save yourself, our humanity, and planet. I'd like to start with something funny. A taxi passenger tapped the driver on the shoulder to ask him a question. The driver screamed, lost control of the car, nearly hit a bus, went up on the footpath, and stopped centimeters from a shop window. For a second, everything was quiet in the cab. Then the driver said, "Look, mate, don't ever do that again. You scared the daylights out of me." The passenger apologized and said, "I didn't realize that a little tap would scare you so much." The driver replied, "Sorry, it's not really your fault. Today is my first day of being a cab driver. I've been driving a funeral van for the last 25 years. As we continue our fight for wealth transformation, this week there have been some good news on the front for saving integrity on our global financial world. The biggest news this week is that the lawsuit that has been impending with Apple, Google, and possibly Adobe, Intel, and Intuit. I really thought Steve Jobs was a more ethical man, and now we know some of his motives. This lawsuit is for the no hire collusion, which means that they could not hire each other's employees, and it was a hands-off agreement between Steve Jobs and Eric Schmidt, CEO of Google. This could cost them $9 billion, as there are 100,000 employees that could have had 90,000 more in salaries. This is disturbing, since the last figure I saw in Apple's bank was $149 billion, cash in the bank, give or take a few million. Integrity, integrity, integrity. Please wake up. We will continue our fight against geoengineering and chemtrails on this show. We will have an expert guest on this topic so you can understand the integral impact of this on the big picture. The cause and effect of chemtrails are destroying our planet and humanity. It is affecting us by the tremendous escalation of Alzheimer's and autism. Please stay tuned. This is our life's wake-up call for Mother Earth, ourselves, and for our children. Our special guest this evening is Dr. Jean Shinoda Bolen. This is the first segment of a two-part series with Dr. Jean Bolen. Jean Shinoda Bolen, MD. Dr. Bolen is a psychiatrist, a Jungian analyst, and an internationally known author of 12 influential books in over 85 foreign translations. She is a Distinguished Life Fellow of the American Psychiatric Association and a former clinical professor of psychiatry at the University of California at San Francisco, and a past board member of the Ms. Foundation for Women. She is in the Academy Award-winning anti-nuclear proliferation film, Women for America. For the World, the Canadian Film Board's Goddess Remembered, and FEM, Women Healing the World. The Millionth Circle initiative was inspired by her book and led to her going to the UN and becoming an advocate for the UN 5th World Conference on Women. Later this year, her new book, Atalanta?
Artemis.
Artemis.
They changed her name.
Oh,
It's
well,
she
changed the name to Artemis. The indomitable spirit of every woman.
Yeah.
And the 30th anniversary edition of Goddesses of Every Woman and the 25th anniversary edition of Gods in Every Man will be published. You can go to the websites www.5wc.org and www.millionthcircle.org. Jean, it's an honor, Dr. Jean Bolen. It's an honor for you to be here. I met you at the premiere of the FEM movie at the San Rafael Theater. and I thought you'd be a wonderful guest. And you are doing so much for women, and I know you've been doing it for years and years. And I applaud you, and I'm very grateful, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, and I'm very, I read your Millionth Circle, and I have to say that probably one of the women that I was involved with getting in, when the women's support group that I was involved with probably got that whole premise from your wonderful lead. So, but please share with, oh, and I have to tell you that I did sign the petition to President Obama for the Fifth World Conference.
The little book is really about how change actually happens through people like us at the grassroots. And the idea that women talking together could change the world could be a far out idea, except that's what we did in 1960 and the 70s. It just appeared to be women meeting in consciousness raising groups, telling the truth of their own lives, and inspiring each other to do whatever it was that moves them towards feeling and being equal. And for most women, it involved going to home base, wherever that was, and bringing about as egalitarian a relationship as she could. For others, it was going to law school, or it was marching, or it was forming conferences. It was below the radar, because all it appeared to be was women talking and reading material and learning about patriarchy. We didn't even think about the word before, and sexism and things like that. And the media made fun of women, saying they were just being hysterical and burning their bras.
Yeah.
But below the radar of how things really work, a critical number of women changed their attitude. It rippled out to people that they cared about, and in a very short time, the world changed for women and everybody else.
You know, I have a question about that. I know that we all have male, female in our, every one of us. Do you think that for women, and this goes for men too on the opposite spectrum, but do you think that women need to exercise more of their male parts of their personality to be able to come out and be more of leaders?
I think that's been one of the major things that women have done since 1960 and 70s, and that actually the idea of men and women developing more of their feminine side, which is nurturing, which is, well, it isn't so much something like a curriculum in which you develop your male side or you develop your female side.
It's evolution, isn't it? More of an evolution of how you want to expand that and how your environment is. And I mean, to me, like growing up, I was very close to my dad, and I spent a lot of time with my dad, so I think I picked up on a lot of his male energy. And yet he was sensitive, and
he encouraged you to be yourself.
Yeah, that's
and that really,
yeah.
To have a good dad in your life, which I also had, is part of the growth into a whole person. Because, well, and one interesting thing in the culture is that active, caring women heroines are what's happening in movies and books. So you have the Hunger Games, you have Katniss Everdeen with her bow and arrow looking after her, bringing food to the table, but she was taught by her father. And when her father died, it was up to her, and she could take it on and stay herself. About that we need as women to recognize, and the world needs to recognize it. But there's something about the value we put on ourselves is the value that we will be taken for.
Absolutely.
And what neuroscience is telling us is that we are hormonally wired differently to respond to stress. That is so basic
Yes.
because the world
Yes.
is exceedingly a stressful place. And if you only have men making the major decisions in this world, and they are wired to do flight or fight, testosterone-driven adrenaline, you have what you have, competitive games. I mean, you talked earlier about Apple, Google,
Yes, right.
corporation
I know.
and things.
Yeah.
And I think, but one of the things about that is that you start out with places like Forbes, or whatever they are, that rank the people.
Right. Right.
And if you have primarily a left brain and you're a competitive male who has to have good numbers, then what happens is exactly what happens. Whatever the bottom line is the score. We are being run at every level by men who have been trained to care about how they are performing from the time they were a little kid. It's a very difficult world to be a little guy in, actually.
It's very stressful.
Because you are always expected to be competitive, and it always seems to have so much to do with the numbers. So what happens then is you have half of the people in this world, the male people, who have through patriarchy risen to the top of the decision making, and they, as it turns out, they have not developed the right side of the brain, which is imagination, which is nurturing,
Creativity.
which is intuition.
Yes.
Imagination, being able to feel yourself in the shoes of another person.
Right.
So you have to have the other half of the population or the other half of the brain, or be in a culture that allows men and women to have whole brains,
Right.
which is
Oh.
what
where is
patriarchy
that?
doesn't do. Well, now, the generation that are the millennials now, the United States of America, here you have a possibility of actually developing both sides, having
Right.
both sides of the brain. And then it's up to women that are this privileged to step up and speak up
Yes.
and to change things.
Yes. Yes. And as you said, just keep talking about it amongst our associates and our friends and even with the men. I like to talk about it with the men too, because it'll help elevate their consciousness around this.
Well, there are also a whole generation of men, because we live in Marin County, which is an extraordinary place to live.
Yes, absolutely.
And part of that is a place where the little girls are playing soccer at 7 years old, and the boys are doing music. And we have a school system, public and private, that actually develops whole people.
Yes.
And then if you have women in positions as beneficiaries of the women's movement, who were educated and have been
more
doing
proactive.
a lot of interesting things,
Yes.
you have people that could resemble more people in the world if
The leaders were
Yeah.
more prevalent.
yeah.
Yeah. I know my daughter, I have one daughter, and we did soccer for 8 years. So, and she's doing leadership roles in her career.
Right.
So I'm real proud of her. So she has developed that
Because
side.
the little girls learn how to work on a team.
Yes, yes.
To win. Okay? And then there's the natural things little girls do, which is to share and talk and tell stories to each other and to play act and things like that. I mean, so
Yeah.
if you have little girls that can be competitive and learn the rules and learn to be a good sport and things, and grow the other side of themselves as well, which is
Right.
to be compassionate, because
Right.
you listen to stories, you learn about how
Yes.
people react.
And you share from emotion, from heart.
And that's what happens when we notice. This is great research that was done at UCLA in 2000. It was a department that studied stress, and the department was under stress. And so what they noticed because there were women
Did you say under stress?
under stress.
Yeah.
There was it's publisher perish, it's budget, it's the kind of stresses that a department gets under.
Right.
And this is a department with men and women in it. Now, a decade before, or 2 decades before, there would be no women at that level. But now, because of the women's movement, in almost every field, there are women scientists.
Yes.
So there were women scientists here.
Yes.
And they noticed, okay, we're all under stress now. Hey, look, we're doing something different. The women in the department, we're gathering, we're drinking coffee, and we're talking about what's going on, and we're cleaning up the place. And we are being, when we go home, we're being very nurturing. And the men in our department are in their hidey holes. And actually, they were behaving like men do under stress, which is flight or fight.
Right.
I mean, flight is just, leave me alone. I've had a bad day. I'm going down into my manhole, and I'm going to watch television, and don't bother me. That's, in this day and age, that's what flight looks like.
Right.
And fight is rage, driving on the freeway. Rage is coming home and taking it out on the wife and kids, being irritable. Right. What they've noticed is when women are stressed, they are nicer to their kids. Actually, there's research on that. We hug our kids more when we're stressed.
We need the oxytocin. Oxytocin, more.
So if you expand it to the bigger world, and we are in a, we're at a planetary crisis.
Yes, we are.
And those decisions are being made by those guys.
I know, and that's why I'm doing my show too, because we need to change that hierarchy. It can't be a hierarchy anymore.
It needs to be more circle. It needs to have more balance. Between men and women.
Yes, and I know that John Gray has done some research and written a book about Work With Me and the difference in trying to work together. And I think that's very valuable. I've read his book. Being able to understand the differences between, understanding how a man handles things. And men need to understand how women, instead of going and hiding, they need to come out a little bit more and exercise their female side of themselves.
Well, they need to learn how to talk more about what's really going on in them, and not feel like to talk about not knowing how to solve this problem, or being really worried about being outperformed by the rival or something like that.
Yes.
A man who does that under certain circumstances now is considered weak. And that's what he learns as a boy, that you're one up or you're one down. The little boy learns on the schoolyard, unless there's a circle capacity. And places like, there are a number of schools in this area in which, like I know one boys' school that meets in circles, and they learn how to talk to each other about what's going on. That is not the usual pattern.
No, it's not. And if we can implode that all over, that would be the solving factor, at least the step in the right direction.
Like in your department, the whole economic side of things. When we went through the recession because of the Lehman Brothers failure, they said at Davos that if it were Lehman Brothers and sisters, do you think this would have happened? No. And it has to do with the competitiveness and the numbers, and that it is the immediate present, and the focus that adrenaline does. And so
lacking heart.
So for women to say it's all their fault, when the need is to have women there to slow the process down, to have conversations going. And when I went to the UN and found that there are these great ideas that have been actually put into documents that much of the world has signed off on, including the Security Council Resolution 1325. It's called the Women, Peace and Security Resolution, passed in the year 2000. It says that women are needed to be involved wherever there's conflict. They need to be involved in the decision-making and resolution in those issues, those places where it is leading up to conflict. They need to be present to defuse the conflict, and after, to settle in the process.
To continue it, the sustainability of it.
Well, but we have, like, Israel and Palestine is going through a so-called peace process one more time, and I think there is one woman present in around the peace table.
Right.
What if there were an equal number of men and women? Because the women have a different view. It isn't a game of winner and loser. It has to do with the hostage of the children. We just do things differently, not universally. I mean, obviously there are power-oriented patriarchal women too.
and also the physical differences and et cetera, but the balance. I mean, that's what's out, is out of balance. And if we can help get that in balance, that's, I think, the key, or one of the keys to healing the planet's people. I mean, I'm just, the more information I get about what's going on in our society, it just makes me cringe with what's been going on at the top.
It's getting worse.
With chemtrails, with geoengineering, with the water issues. It's like, when is this going to stop?
Like, when will Congress do the work instead of doing the partisan, we don't compromise, we don't...
And I know there's a huge plea for women to get more involved in politics. And I tell you the truth, my ancestor is one of the forefathers of our Constitution, in George Washington's day. He was one of the right arms of George Washington. And to tell you the truth, I would be afraid. I mean, I have enough power inside of myself and passion to do that, but I'm a little scared because there's so much lying and deceiving going on, and I just can't tolerate that. How, it's like, how can I be there? I mean, I would be there in the truth, because that's what they need. They need to know the truth, and they're not being truthful. And so we need some women to step up, like Marianne Williamson is going into.
Well, we need some really good women to do so. And they're 20, one of the things that Time magazine said recently was, when the government did not shut down for the second time, it was all due to the 20 women bipartisan senators who have been meeting as if in circle, because when they meet as a committee, or I would call it a circle, without any notes or aids, and they talk about things. Well, whenever you get women together talking about things, and they're not just talking about agenda items, they're talking about each other's health, how they're feeling, how their kids are doing. You don't have to have somebody taking notes in the room to know that if you have women who are day in and day out working and have these problems that they're relating to, that if the government shuts down, women can't imagine how it's going to be for those other people to not get their checks. It's not just numbers, it's people.
Well, that's the whole key.
And that is
humanity.
The key.
Humanity is the key, and holding us together. And we as women are responsible for doing that and changing the way the relationships are, by setting an example.
Oh, I think we have to be more than just setting an example. I really do.
Well, right now it's like
I do really
major.
Think we have to, especially since we've been the beneficiaries of a time in history when we have been able to get education and have responsibilities and have traveled, and I mean, we've been a very privileged generation. In fact, I really do make a point that never in history has there ever been as privileged and therefore as responsible a generation of women as exists in the United States and in the first world countries now.
And bless you for being in the forefront of that.
Well, I'm one.
Yes, you
and
are.
Everybody who is willing to step up and take on what I call her assignment, or his assignment, is doing it. So we talked before we began taping this, that this is your assignment.
Yes.
And
sometimes I get overwhelmed because it's huge, and I can't do this by myself.
No, you just do your piece of it.
Yes.
And if you have a circle of support, this is what the women's movement learned. If you have say 5 other women who you can be really truthful to, which women seem better at this when they, because we exchange vulnerabilities. Women's friendships are not competitive games compared to so many relationships that are in the world, in the patriarchal world.
Right.
So we exchange vulnerabilities, and we can say, I'm scared to do this. I'm scared when I go to the hospital for the biopsy. I'm scared when I'm going to speak up to my boss and say, I am not being paid as much as this coworker, male coworker over here who's doing the same thing. In fact, I'm doing more than he is. I think a raise is in order, something like that.
Right.
If you have other women behind you who know you are going to go to do what's hard for you because you told them, I'm scared. But this is what courage is.
Absolutely.
Courage is doing it even though you're scared.
Yes, yes. And it takes courage to be living, period.
Well, it's not that hard sometimes for us.
But I mean, you know, with all the things that come about, you know, the challenge. I mean, I've had so many challenges in my life, and I feel like I've got a big C, not only for Cheryl, but courage. Because I've been through so many challenges, but it makes you stronger. I have chosen to make me stronger.
Well, the saying is true, that which does not kill you makes you strong. There's some truth to that. There's some truth to that. And to picking yourself up and going at it again.
Yeah,
Whatever.
I mean, what option do we have?
Well, some people give up.
Yeah, well, I'm never going to give up. We are ending now. This has been fun, Jean. I've enjoyed this.
I do too.
Especially since the beginning. Oh, Lord, but thank you. I'm honored that you came. Oh, gosh.
There's lots of love energy, and it was meaningful and fun.
Yes, yes. And thank you. And I'm sure I'll be seeing you again soon. I'll leave you with this. Never give up wherever you are and doing in your life. Work with integrity, and most of all, keep a positive attitude, first and foremost with your family and friends. Be aware of your negative thoughts and catch yourself before the words come out of your mouth. Be grateful for who you are and where you've come from and what you have, and be grateful for your freedom. Please forgive yourself and others. It will set you free. And eat healthy. Good nutrition feeds your mind and your body temple. Don't forget to exercise. Feed your spirituality with meditation and prayer, with unconditional love. Love yourself unconditionally. Stop criticizing, judging, and allowing others to dominate the way you feel about yourself. Be compassionate and share your abundance and wealth with others. When fear knocks, let faith answer the door.